The soldier who had 3 fiancées in 3 different cities. This is the story of James William Carter, a man who looked 3 women in the eyes and promised each of them forever. A man who gave 3 engagement rings. A man who wrote 3 sets of love letters. A man who had 3 weddings planned for the same month. And a man whose lies would explode on the same day in the most public and devastating way possible. But this isn't just about James. This is about Dorothy Miller in Boston, about Helen Richardson in Philadelphia, and about Ruth Thompson in New York City. 3 women who thought they were the only one. 3 women who were planning their futures. 3 women who would meet each other at a train station in 1945 and realize their entire lives had been a lie. This is a story about deception, about betrayal, about what happens when a charming man thinks he can have it all, and about 3 women who refuse to be victims. James William Carter was born in Hartford, Connecticut in 1918. He was the kind of boy who could talk his way out of anything. Charming, handsome, smooth. By the time he was 16, he'd dated half the girls in his high school, promising each one she was special, she was different, she was the one. His mother knew what he was. "Jimmy," she'd say, shaking her head, "one day your lies are going to catch up with you." But James would just smile that smile and promise to do better. He never did. He worked various jobs after high school. Sales mostly. He was good at it. Good at telling people what they wanted to hear. Good at making promises. Not so good at keeping them. By 21, he'd been fired from 3 jobs for misunderstandings with female co-workers who thought his attention meant more than it did. Then came December 1941, Pearl Harbor. America entered the war, and James saw an opportunity. He enlisted in the Army in January 1942, not because he was particularly patriotic, but because he saw what was happening. Soldiers were heroes. Women loved heroes. And he'd be traveling, moving around, never in one place too long. Perfect. James went through basic training at Fort Dix in New Jersey. He was a decent soldier, not the best, not the worst, but he had that smile, that charm. Officers liked him. Fellow soldiers found him amusing. And when he got his first weekend pass in March 1942 and took the train to Boston, he was ready to test his theory. Dorothy Miller was 22 years old, working as a secretary at an insurance company in downtown Boston. She lived with her parents in a modest house in Dorchester. She was pretty in a quiet way, with light brown hair she wore pinned up and hazel eyes that seemed to see too much. She'd had one serious boyfriend before, but he'd joined the Navy right after Pearl Harbor and had written to end things a month later, saying long distance was too hard. Dorothy was heartbroken, but trying to move on. That's why, when her friend Sarah suggested they go to a USO dance on a Saturday night in March 1942, Dorothy agreed. It would be nice, Sarah said, to do their part, to give the soldiers a good time before they shipped out. The hall was crowded, full of men in uniform and women in their best dresses. A band played swing music. Dorothy stood on the side watching couples dance, not sure she wanted to be there, and then he approached. "Excuse me," James said, that smile already in place. "I've been watching you all night and I have to know, are you going to make me ask twice for this dance?" Dorothy blushed. "I'm not much of a dancer." "Neither am I," James lied smoothly. "But I ship out next week, and I'd really regret it if I didn't at least try." She said yes. They danced. He was actually an excellent dancer, leading her gently, making her feel graceful. They talked. He told her about growing up in Hartford, about his dreams of opening his own business after the war, about how lonely training had been. He asked about her, seemed genuinely interested in her answers, remembered details she mentioned. "I'd really like to see you again," James said at the end of the night. "I know I don't have much time, but would you have dinner with me tomorrow?" Dorothy said yes. She met him the next evening at a small Italian restaurant. He was already there, waiting, a single rose in hand. "I saw this and thought of you," he said. It was perfect. Too perfect. But Dorothy didn't see that. She saw a handsome soldier, about to go to war, who seemed to genuinely care about her. They spent every moment of that weekend together. Sunday afternoon walking through Boston Common, Sunday evening at a movie. He held her hand. He was a perfect gentleman, and before he left to catch his train back to Fort Dix, he kissed her. "I'll write," he promised. "Every day if I can. Will you wait for me, Dorothy? Will you write back?" "Yes," she said, already falling for him. "Yes, I'll wait." James kept his promise. Letters arrived regularly. Sweet letters, romantic letters, letters that made Dorothy's heart soar. He wrote about his training, about missing her, about dreaming of their future together. And Dorothy wrote back, pages and pages of her days, her thoughts, her growing love for this soldier she'd only spent 2 days with. In May 1942, James got another weekend pass. This time, he told his commanding officer he was going to visit his sick mother in Hartford. Instead, he took a train to Philadelphia. Helen Richardson was 24, a teacher at an elementary school in a working-class neighborhood. She was tall, with dark red hair and green eyes, and a sharp wit that intimidated most men. She'd been engaged once, at 20, but had called it off when she realized her fiancé expected her to quit teaching once they married. Helen loved teaching, loved her independence. She wasn't sure she'd ever find a man who'd accept that. She went to the train station that Saturday to pick up her brother, who was supposed to be coming home on leave from the army, but his train was delayed. While waiting, Helen sat on a bench, grading papers. She didn't notice James approaching until he spoke. "You're a teacher," he observed, looking at the papers. Helen looked up, slightly annoyed at the interruption. "Very observant." "I always respected teachers," James said, sitting down uninvited. "My favorite teacher in high school, Miss Patterson, she changed my life, made me believe I could be something. It was a lie." James had barely paid attention in school, but he'd learned that complimenting a woman's profession worked wonders. Helen softened slightly. "What are you waiting for?" "My train doesn't leave for another 2 hours," James lied. His train back to Fort Dix left the next evening. "I was visiting a buddy in the hospital here. He got injured in training. Seeing him like that made me think about what's important, you know?" They talked. Helen found herself enjoying the conversation. He was different from other soldiers she'd met, seemed more thoughtful, asked intelligent questions about teaching. When her brother's train finally arrived, she introduced James to him. Her brother, Tom, liked James immediately. "Good man," he said to Helen later. "Officers like him get their men home safe." Before Helen left the station with her brother, James asked if he could write to her. "I don't have many people to write to," he said, "and I'd really appreciate having someone like you, someone intelligent, to correspond with. Would that be okay?" Helen hesitated, then said yes and gave him her address. It seemed innocent enough. Pen pals. Nothing more. But James's first letter wasn't innocent. It was thoughtful, funny, asking her opinions on books, on teaching methods, on the world. Helen wrote back, a long letter. James replied immediately. Within a month, their correspondence had shifted from friendly to personal. By June, it had become romantic. In July 1942, James arranged another leave, this time telling his CO he needed to go to Hartford because his father was ill. His father was fine. James went to Philadelphia. He surprised Helen at her school on a Friday afternoon, waiting outside as children poured out. "James!" she exclaimed, shocked. "What are you doing here?" "I had to see you," he said simply. "Your letters..." "Helen, I think I'm falling in love with you." They spent the weekend together. James met her family, charmed her parents, impressed her brother. By Sunday night, when he had to leave, he'd convinced Helen that what they had was real, that after the war they had a future. "I know it's fast," he said, "but war does that. It makes you realize you can't wait for the perfect moment. Helen, I've never met anyone like you. Promise me you'll wait for me." "I will," Helen said, and meant it. Now James had 2 women waiting for him, writing to him, believing in a future with him. He kept the letters carefully organized, making sure never to mix them up, never to mention one to the other. It was exhausting keeping the lies straight, but he was managing it. In August 1942, James's unit was told they'd be shipping out to England in October for final training before deployment. James had 2 months. He decided to go for 3. He'd been stationed near New York City for a week of additional training. On his day off, he took the subway to Manhattan, walked through Central Park, and that's where he met Ruth Thompson. Ruth was 23, working as a nurse at Bellevue Hospital. She was taking a rare afternoon off, sitting by the lake, feeding ducks. She had blonde hair, cut shorter than was fashionable, and blue eyes that looked tired. The war had brought a flood of patients to the hospital, and Ruth was working 60-hour weeks. James sat down on the bench next to her. "You look like you need a vacation," he said. Ruth laughed, a tired sound. "You have no idea." "Nurse," James guessed, noticing her sensible shoes and the way she rubbed her feet. "How'd you know?" "My mother was a nurse," James lied. His mother had been a housewife. She had that same look, like she'd seen too much suffering but couldn't look away. Ruth studied him. "You're good at reading people." "Comes with the territory," James said. "Infantry. You learn to read your fellow soldiers real quick, figure out who's going to crack under pressure." They talked for hours. Ruth found herself opening up to this stranger, telling him about the stress of work, about the boys coming in from training accidents, about her fear of what would happen when the wounded started coming back from overseas. James listened, really listened, or seemed to. He told her about his own fears, about shipping out soon, about not knowing if he'd come back. "I just wish," James said softly, "that I had something to come back to. Someone waiting. My family's not close. I don't have many friends. I feel like I'm going to war and no one would even notice if I didn't come back." Ruth's heart broke for him. "That's not true. I'm sure people care about you." "Do you?" James asked, looking directly at her. "I mean, would you care if something happened to me?" Ruth barely knew him, they'd just met. But there was something about him, about this moment. "Yes," she said quietly. "I would care." James took her hand. "Can I write to you? Would you write back? Just knowing someone in New York cared would mean so much." Ruth agreed. They met twice more that week, before James had to return to Fort Dix. By the time he left, Ruth Thompson was in love with him too. October 1942. James shipped out to England with his unit. He had 3 women writing to him now. Dorothy in Boston, Helen in Philadelphia, Ruth in New York. 3 sets of letters to write, 3 personalities to maintain. Dorothy liked sweet romantic words. Helen preferred intellectual conversation. Ruth needed emotional support. James gave each of them exactly what they wanted. The next 2 years passed in a blur of training and waiting. James's unit was being prepared for the invasion of Europe. Through it all, he maintained his 3 relationships. He sent Dorothy a lock of his hair. He sent Helen a book of poetry with annotations. He sent Ruth his dog tags to keep safe. Each woman treasured her token, believing she was special, believing she was the only one. In his letters, James was careful. He never mentioned the other women, obviously, but he also developed elaborate stories. He told Dorothy his family had disowned him for enlisting against their wishes, so she shouldn't be surprised if she never met them. He told Helen his parents had died in a car accident years ago, explaining why he was alone. He told Ruth he was an orphan, raised by an elderly aunt who had recently passed away. 3 different stories, making sure none of them would try to contact his family, making sure if they ever compared notes, they wouldn't be able to trace his lies back to the source. In December 1943, James took a big step. He sent each woman an engagement ring. They weren't expensive, just simple gold bands with small diamonds purchased from a jeweler in London. But to Dorothy, Helen, and Ruth, they were everything. Dorothy cried when she opened the package, read his letter proposing. She said yes immediately, wrote back that same day. She showed the ring to everyone at work, told her parents, began planning a wedding for when James came home. Helen was more reserved, but equally moved. She said yes, but privately, not showing the ring to many people. She was a private person, and this felt too precious to share widely. She began saving money for their future, looking at small houses they might afford on a teacher's and soldier's salary. Ruth said yes, and wore the ring on a chain around her neck under her nurse's uniform. It felt more real that way, closer to her heart. She began imagining the life they'd have after the war, the children they might have, the home they'd build. June 6, 1944, D-Day. James landed at Normandy with his unit. The fighting was brutal. Men died around him. He was lucky, taking only a minor injury. Shrapnel to his left arm that earned him a week in a field hospital, but nothing more serious. He wrote to all 3 women, telling each of them about his injury in slightly different ways, making each feel like she was the only one he was confiding in about how scared he'd been. The war continued. James fought through France into Germany. His unit saw heavy combat during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944. More men died. James survived again, though he took another minor injury, this time to his leg. Not serious, but enough to send him to a hospital in England for 2 weeks. While recovering, James made a decision. The war was ending. Everyone could feel it. Germany was collapsing. It would be over soon, maybe by spring, which meant he'd be going home, back to America, back to 3 women who thought they were going to marry him. James knew he needed to make a choice, but the truth was he didn't want to. He liked all 3 women. Dorothy was sweet and uncomplicated. Helen was intelligent and challenging. Ruth was passionate and caring. Why should he have to give up 2 of them? A plan formed in his mind. It was insane, probably impossible, but James had talked his way out of difficult situations before. Maybe he could do it again. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945. James's unit was processed for return to the United States. They would ship out from Southampton, England in late June, arriving in New York in early July. From there, soldiers would be discharged and sent home to their various cities. James wrote 3 letters. To Dorothy: I'll be arriving in Boston on July 15th. Can you meet me at South Station at 2 p.m.? I can't wait to see you and start our life together. To Helen: I'll be in Philadelphia on July 15th. Can you meet me at 30th Street Station at 2 p.m.? I want to see you immediately. To Ruth: I'll be arriving at Grand Central Terminal on July 15th at 2 p.m. Please be there. I've dreamed of this moment for 3 years. James was playing a dangerous game. The 3 cities were close enough that trains ran frequently between them. His plan was simple but insane. Meet Dorothy at 2 p.m. in Boston. Make an excuse about needing to check in with military authorities immediately. Promise to see her for dinner. Take the 3 p.m. train to New York. Meet Ruth at Grand Central at 5:30 p.m. Make another excuse. Promise to see her later that evening. Take the evening train to Philadelphia. Meet Helen at 8 p.m. Tell her he got held up with military paperwork. Then over the next few weeks he'd figure it out. Maybe marry one, disappear on the others. Maybe string all 3 along longer. Maybe something would happen that would solve the problem for him. But fate had other plans. On July 10th, 1945, 5 days before James's scheduled arrival, Dorothy Miller from Boston made a decision. She couldn't wait 5 more days. She'd taken the week off work to prepare for James's homecoming. Her parents were throwing a welcome home party. Everything was ready. But she wanted to surprise him. She'd take the train to New York and meet him at the port when his ship came in. She didn't know exactly which day or which port, but she'd go to New York, check the military arrivals, find him. It would be romantic, the kind of story they'd tell their grandchildren. Dorothy took the train from Boston to New York on the morning of July 10th. She was nervous and excited, wearing her best dress. The engagement ring James had sent her prominent on her finger. She carried a small suitcase, planning to stay a few days if needed. When she arrived at Grand Central Terminal, she wasn't sure where to start. She asked an information clerk where she might find information about troop ships arriving from Europe. The clerk directed her to a military liaison office in the station. Dorothy went there and waited in line. In front of her was a woman about her age, also asking about troop arrivals. A woman with dark red hair and a determined expression. The woman was holding a piece of paper with ship names and arrival dates. "Excuse me," Dorothy said, making conversation while they waited. "Are you meeting someone too?" The woman turned and smiled politely. "Yes, my fiancé. He's coming home from the war." "Me too," Dorothy said, excited to meet someone in the same situation. "What's his name? Maybe they served together." "James Carter," the woman said. Dorothy froze. "What? James Carter? He's with the... That's my fiancé's name," Dorothy interrupted, her voice strange. The red-headed woman stared at her. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking. My fiancé is James William Carter. He's arriving on July 15th. The woman's face went pale. That's when my James is arriving. But there must be a mistake. Maybe there are 2 soldiers with the same name." "Maybe," Dorothy said, but her hands were shaking. What does your James look like? Tall, about 6 feet, brown hair, blue eyes. He has a scar on his left forearm from shrapnel and one on his leg from the Battle of the Bulge, Dorothy finished, feeling like she might faint. Oh God, the two women stared at each other. The truth was impossible to deny. The same name, the same injuries, the same arrival date. But that meant, "Are you engaged to him?" the red-headed woman asked, her voice hard now. "Yes," Dorothy whispered, holding up her left hand. The ring glinted in the light. The other woman's face went white. She reached into her purse and pulled out her own hand, an identical ring. They stood there in the middle of Grand Central Terminal, two women realizing simultaneously that they'd been lied to for years. People flowed around them, but they didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at each other and at the matching rings. "I'm Helen," the red-headed woman finally said. "Helen Richardson, from Philadelphia." "Dorothy Miller, Boston." "How long?" Helen asked. 3 years. I met him in March 1942. He proposed in December 1943. "Same," Helen said. "Almost the exact same timeline. I met him in May 1942. They moved to a bench, away from the crowd. They compared letters, dates, stories, everything matched. Same man, same lies, just told to two different women." "What do we do?" Dorothy asked, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know," Helen said. She was angry, visibly shaking with rage. "But I'm not letting him get away with this. We need to confront him. When he arrives." "Both of us." "Yes, both of us. He needs to see what he's done. He needs to face us." They exchanged information. Dorothy got a hotel room in New York. They agreed to meet on July 15th, both of them, at Grand Central Terminal at 2 p.m., which is when James had told Dorothy he'd be there. But then Dorothy remembered. "Wait, he told me he'd be in Boston at 2 p.m., at South Station." Helen's eyes widened. "He told me Philadelphia, 30th Street Station, also at 2 p.m. He was going to go to all 3 cities in one day." "All 3? Helen caught the slip. "There's a third one?" Dorothy shook her head frantically. "I just meant..." But Helen was already standing, looking around the terminal. "If he's meeting one of us here at Grand Central, and he told you Boston and me Philadelphia, then there must be someone here in New York. Someone he told he'd meet at Grand Central." They went back to the military liaison office. "This is going to sound strange," Helen said to the clerk, "but has anyone else been asking about James William Carter? Any other women?" The clerk looked uncomfortable. "I'm not supposed to share that kind of information." "Please," Dorothy begged. "It's important." The clerk hesitated, then sighed. "There was a nurse. Yesterday. She was asking about the same soldier. I gave her the same information I gave you ladies. He's arriving on the 15th. "A nurse," Helen said. "Did she leave her name?" "Ruth something. She said she worked at Bellevue." Dorothy and Helen looked at each other. 3. There were 3 of them. That afternoon they went to Bellevue Hospital. They asked for Nurse Ruth Thompson. When she came to the lobby on her break, confused about who was asking for her, she found 2 women waiting. "Are you engaged to James William Carter?" Helen asked without preamble. Ruth's face answered before her mouth could. "How do you know, James?" "I'm engaged to him," Helen said, holding up her ring. "So am I," Dorothy added, showing hers. Ruth staggered. A passing orderly caught her arm. "Are you okay, Ruth?" "No," she whispered. "No, I'm not okay." They went to a nearby diner, sat in a back booth, and compared notes. 3 women, 3 timelines, 3 sets of promises. All lies. Ruth was the most devastated. She was the quietest of the 3, the most trusting. "I thought he loved me," she kept saying. "I thought we'd get married, have children. I've been waiting 3 years." "We all have," Helen said grimly, "and he's been lying to all of us." "What do we do?" Dorothy asked again. Helen's jaw was set. "We meet him, all 3 of us, together, on July 15th, at Grand Central, since that's where he's actually arriving, and we make sure he understands exactly what he's done." "And then?" Ruth asked. "And then," Helen said, "he doesn't get any of us." The next 5 days were surreal. Dorothy, Helen, and Ruth met every day. They shared stories, letters, compared the different versions of James they'd each been shown. Dorothy had thought he was a romantic. Helen had thought he was an intellectual. Ruth had thought he was sensitive and vulnerable. But he'd just been telling each of them what they wanted to hear. They also planned. July 15th would be public, humiliating. Justice. The day came. Dorothy, Helen, and Ruth all went to Grand Central Terminal. They dressed in their best. They wore their rings. They were a united front. They arrived early, standing together near Track 17, where the arriving soldiers would be processed. Other families were there, excited, holding welcome home signs. Dorothy, Helen, and Ruth held nothing. They just waited. At 2:15 p.m., the soldiers started coming through, men in uniform, tired but happy, looking for their families. And then Dorothy saw him. "There," she said quietly. James William Carter walked through the gate, a duffel bag over his shoulder. He looked good, healthy, smiling. His eyes scanned the crowd, looking for Ruth, since this was Grand Central. He spotted her, his smile widening, and started walking toward her. Then he saw Dorothy standing next to Ruth. His smile faltered. His steps slowed. Then he saw Helen on Ruth's other side. James stopped walking. People flowed around him. Families reunited. Soldiers were swept up in embraces. But James stood frozen, staring at the three women standing together, wearing matching rings, waiting for him. He could have run, should have run, but where would he go? His feet carried him forward, one step at a time, until he stood in front of them. "Hello, James," Helen said, her voice cold. "Surprised to see us?" "All of us." James opened his mouth, closed it. No words came out. What could he possibly say? 3 years, Dorothy said, tears already falling. 3 years of letters, of promises, of believing you loved me. "I do love you," James said automatically, then realized his mistake. You love which one of us?" Ruth asked quietly. "All of us? None of us?" People were starting to notice. Other soldiers, other families, stopping to watch this strange reunion. James tried to smile, tried to charm his way out. "Look, I can explain..." "Explain what?" Helen interrupted. "Explain how you proposed to 3 different women? Explain how you planned to meet all 3 of us on the same day? Explain which one of us you were actually going to marry? James looked between them, trapped, caught. All his smooth words gone. "I care about all of you." "Care," Helen repeated. "You care about us." "I'm sorry," James said, and maybe he even meant it. "I never meant to hurt anyone. It got complicated." "Complicated," Ruth said, her voice breaking. "You made promises. We wore your rings. We waited for you. We turned down other men. We planned our lives around you, and it was just complicated?" A crowd had gathered now, soldiers and their families, watching this scene unfold. James was aware of them, aware of how this looked. "Can we talk about this somewhere private?" he asked desperately. "No," Helen said firmly. "You did this publicly, with your letters, with your promises. You wanted 3 women. Well, here we are, all of us. Together. What now, James? Which one do you choose?" James looked at each of them. Dorothy still crying, Ruth looking broken, Helen furious. He could see there was no way out, no charming words that would fix this, no lie that would work. "I choose none of them," a voice said. They all turned. Dorothy looked at Helen, then Ruth, confused. "Who said that?" "I did," Helen said. "I'm done. I'm not giving him the satisfaction of choosing. James, I don't want you. Take your ring back." She pulled the ring off her finger and threw it at him. It hit his chest and fell to the floor. "Me too," Ruth said, her voice stronger now. She removed her ring and dropped it at his feet. "I don't want a man who could do this, who could lie like this. You're not worth it." Dorothy was the last. She looked at the ring on her finger, the ring she'd worn for a year and a half, believing it meant forever. Slowly, she pulled it off. "I wanted to marry you," she said quietly. "I really did, but I don't even know who you are. I don't think I ever did." She handed the ring to him, pressing it into his palm. The 3 women stood together, no longer wearing his rings, no longer bound to him. James held the 3 rings in his hand, standing in the middle of Grand Central Terminal, surrounded by staring onlookers, completely alone. "I'm sorry," he said again, uselessly. "So are we," Helen said. "Come on." She linked arms with Dorothy and Ruth. "Let's go." The three of them walked away, leaving James standing there. They didn't look back. They went to the same diner they'd been meeting at all week, ordered coffee, sat in silence for a while. "What now?" Dorothy finally asked. "Now," Helen said. "We move on. We live our lives. We find men who actually deserve us." "Do you think he'll try to contact us?" Ruth asked. "Maybe," Helen said. "But we don't answer. We're done with James William Carter." They nodded. Agreement. Solidarity. These three women, strangers a week ago, now bound by shared betrayal. But their story doesn't end there, because what happened next was unexpected. Dorothy went back to Boston, went back to her job. Her co-workers asked about her fiancé, when the wedding would be. Dorothy just said it hadn't worked out, didn't elaborate. But her friend Sarah, the one who'd taken her to that USO dance 3 years ago, noticed something was wrong. She pressed until Dorothy told her everything. Sarah was furious on Dorothy's behalf. But she also did something else. She introduced Dorothy to her cousin, Michael, who had also just come home from the war. "Just as friends," Sarah said. "He needs friends. You need friends. No pressure." Dorothy and Michael did become friends. Slowly, carefully, Dorothy learned to trust again. Michael was patient, honest, clear about his intentions. By 1947, they were married. Dorothy had 2 children, lived a long, happy life. She never told Michael the full story about James. Some things were too painful to revisit. Helen went back to Philadelphia and threw herself into teaching. She became principal of her school by 1950, one of the youngest in the state. She dated occasionally but was cautious, wary. In 1952, she met a fellow teacher, Thomas, at a conference. They courted for 3 years before marrying in 1955. Thomas knew about James, Helen had told him early on, needing him to understand why she was so careful. Thomas understood, never pushed, let Helen move at her own pace. They had 1 daughter and were happily married for 42 years until Thomas's death in 1997. Ruth stayed in New York, kept working as a nurse. The betrayal had hurt her the most deeply. She didn't date for 5 years, convinced she couldn't trust her own judgment. But in 1950, a doctor at Bellevue, David, asked her to coffee. Just coffee. Ruth said no. He asked again a month later. She said no again. He kept asking once a month for 6 months. Finally, Ruth said yes. David was steady, reliable, boring in the best way. They married in 1951 and had 4 children. Ruth never wore rings after that, the memory of James's fake engagement ring too strong. David understood. And James got exactly what he deserved, nothing. He tried to contact each woman, wrote letters apologizing, explaining, begging for another chance. None of them responded. He went to Boston, tried to find Dorothy. Her parents refused to speak to him. He went to Philadelphia, tried to see Helen at her school. She had him removed by police. He went back to New York, tried to find Ruth at the hospital. Security escorted him out. James moved around after that, never settling. Worked various jobs, none lasting long. He dated, but his heart wasn't in it. Or maybe he'd finally realized he didn't actually have one. He never married, never had children. Died alone in 1982 at age 64 in a VA hospital in Florida, still carrying in his wallet 3 faded photographs. One of Dorothy, one of Helen, one of Ruth. The 3 women who got away. But the story still doesn't end there. Because there's one more chapter. In 1995, 50 years after that day at Grand Central Terminal, something remarkable happened. Dorothy's daughter was getting married. The wedding was in Boston. Dorothy was 75 years old now, a widow, grandmother of 5. She was happy, blessed, had lived a good life. At the wedding reception, Dorothy was talking to relatives when a woman approached. An elegant woman with silver hair, about Dorothy's age. "Excuse me," the woman said. "This might sound strange, but are you Dorothy Miller? Or you were Dorothy Miller before you married?" Dorothy looked at the woman, trying to place her. "Yes, I was. How do you—" "I'm Helen," the woman said. "Helen Richardson. Well, Helen Matthews now. Do you remember? 1945. Grand Central Terminal." Dorothy's hand went to her throat. "Helen. Oh my God. Helen." They embraced. these two women who had shared one of the worst days of their lives together. They moved to a quiet corner, catching up, sharing stories of the last 50 years. Helen had moved to Massachusetts 5 years ago to be near her daughter, had seen Dorothy's daughter's wedding announcement in the local paper, had recognized the mother of the bride's name. "Have you ever heard from Ruth?" Dorothy asked. "No, I tried to find her once, maybe 10 years after everything happened. But she'd married, changed her name. I lost track." "I've thought about her over the years," Dorothy admitted. "About both of you. Wondered how you were, if you were happy." "I was," Helen said. "I am, are you?" "Yes," Dorothy said. "Very." They talked for an hour, filling in 50 years. Then Helen said, "I have to ask, did you ever regret it? Walking away that day?" Dorothy thought about it. "No, he didn't deserve any of us. We made the right choice." "Yes," Helen agreed. "We did." They exchanged contact information, promised to stay in touch this time, and they did, for the remaining years of their lives. Dorothy died in 2003 at 83. Helen followed in 2006 at 88. Ruth, they never found, though they tried. She'd moved somewhere after marrying David, living a life that didn't intersect with Boston or Philadelphia again, but the story of the three fiancés became a legend. Dorothy told her children eventually, when they were adults. Helen told hers. The story was passed down, a warning and an inspiration, a warning about trusting too easily, believing pretty words without proof, and an inspiration about strength, about women supporting each other, about refusing to be victims. The story spread through veterans groups, through family reunions, through oral histories of the war. It was written about in a local history book in 2010, a small article, just 2 pages, but it captured the essence of it. 3 women, 1 lying man, and the day they stood together and refused to let him win. People ask sometimes in the retelling whether James ever really loved any of them. The answer, probably, is no. Not in the way they deserved. He loved the idea of them. He loved being loved. He loved the game, the challenge, the thrill of keeping 3 different lives going. But real love. Love requires honesty, respect, the willingness to put someone else first. James was never capable of that. Dorothy, Helen, and Ruth found real love eventually, with men who deserved them, men who were honest, faithful, steady. They built lives, raised families, grew old with partners who valued them. They each got the happy ending they'd dreamed of, just not with the man they'd originally thought. And maybe that's the real lesson. That sometimes the wrong person comes into your life to teach you something, to show you what you don't want, what you won't accept, what you're worth. James taught 3 women that they deserved better, and they believed him. Not his words, but his actions. And they went out and found better. That day at Grand Central Terminal in 1945, when 3 women stood together wearing matching rings, waiting for a man who had betrayed them all, could have ended differently. One of them might have forgiven him, might have believed his apologies, his excuses, might have married him anyway, settling for half a love for a man who couldn't be faithful. But they didn't. They chose themselves. They chose dignity. They chose truth over comfortable lies. And in doing so, they became more than just 3 women who were deceived. They became 3 women who refused to be broken by it, who stood together, who walked away together, who saved each other from a lifetime of betrayal. The soldier who had 3 fiancées in 3 different cities ended up with none of them. And the 3 fiancées ended up with everything. Love, family, respect. Lives lived on their own terms. That's not a story of betrayal. That's a story of strength, and it's a story that deserves to be told. The end. Narrator's note. This story is fictional but inspired by multiple true accounts of soldiers during war who maintained relationships with multiple women in different cities. It serves as a reminder that real love requires honesty, and that walking away from deception is always the right choice, no matter how hard it might be.